Hello and welcome. I'm Dom Varelli, a senior here at Bates.
My name is Maggie Metzler, and I'm a freshman at Bates.
And I'm Luca Balzano, a sophomore. Today, we'll be your hosts for this episode of Crop and Click.
We're here at Bates College in Lewiston, Maine, the same state in which Berenice Abbott's photos that we'll be talking about today were produced.
In this podcast, we focus on 3 photographs made by the American photographer Berenice Abbott around 1965 and what they show about work, nature, and everyday order.
In Abbott's spring sluicing, cut logs collect in a dense pile at the base of the dam, as humans try to direct fast, stubborn water. In comparison, man on a horse-drawn sledge brings winter labor up close with the harness, the sled, the stacked wood, and the shared effort between human and animal. Her work, Untitled Mealtime, moves indoors to a crowded mess hall, where benches and beams line people up into a workable routine.
Taken together, we point to clear visual choices made by Abbott in these photographs that show strong lines, repeating shapes, and bright dark contrasts that make busy scenes feel organized. We'll also compare a few of Abbott's earlier New York photos to show that the same eye for photographic structure runs from city streets to logging yards and dining halls.
More broadly, our goal with this podcast is to show how Abbott, working as a documentary photographer, visualizes the systems that make complex work possible and what those systems demand from the people who keep them running.
Berenice Abbott's career as a documentary photographer lived through the meaning and significance of her realist vision. The general shift in photographic practice that occurred in the 1920s and 30s away from beauty and toward an interest in the artifacts of everyday life overlaps with Abbott's interest in realism. Abbott's definition of realism had different meanings throughout her career and was often used as a general term when no other word seemed adequate.
Abbott moved to New York City from Springfield, Ohio in 1918 after attending The Ohio State University for a year and a half. Following the example of Eugene Atget, who photographed Paris, Abbott spent 4 years photographing all aspects of New York City during the Great Depression, when change and strife were ever present. Abbott then moved to Maine in 1966, where she lived until her death. Her work extends beyond representation to establish a communicative interaction with her audience. Throughout her body of work, historical transformations are evident, alongside America's growing industrialization.
Let's start with spring sluicing, a photo taken in Monson, Maine in the 1960s, showing the Piscataquis River filled with logs.
Maggie, when you were first looking at this photo, what stood out to you the most?
A few different things stood out to me. The left side of this photo is taken up with logs that appear to be halted in their movement, while the right side depicts rushing whitewater, with logs moving at a much quicker pace, being carried down the river. The river and logs facing every which way are chaotic in their own distinct ways, as the water seems to be a more smoothed out version of the logs, much like how adding pixels to an image enhances the viewing experience. Between many of the logs on the left, collected snow is visible, which is interesting considering that it does not appear to be snowing in the photo. This raises the question of how long these logs have been sitting on the side of the river, discarded by the water rushing out of the dam. Do they ever move, or are they frozen in place, waiting until warm weather comes and thaws them out of their temporary river prison? The focal point of this image is the large volume of logs that are in the river, and someone unfamiliar with the history of logging, specifically in Maine, might wonder why the logs are in the river and whether their presence is intentional. These logs are clearly being pushed downriver, which raises questions for the viewer, such as, where are the logs headed?
You know, Maggie, I was actually wondering that myself. Why are they in the river? And are all Maine rivers somehow just covered in logs?
To understand these questions, we have to dive into the geography of Maine. North and west of Mount Katahdin, Maine is practically uninhabited. However, from the early 18th century to the present, pulpwood and saw timber have flowed constantly from that area through rivers and streams. Those who lived in this area in the 1960s, when this photo was taken, often did so solely for economic opportunities, not due to personal interest. These professions, such as logging, demanded long hours and intense physical labor, often offering little to no protection or benefits, which was a stark contrast to the jobs emerging in New York City's ever-growing industrial labor market.
Now, can we connect what we're seeing here to any of Abbott's other photographs?
Yeah, actually, an image that I'd like to highlight is Manhattan Bridge Looking Up from Abbott's 1936 Changing New York series. This image was taken looking up at one of the piers of the Manhattan Bridge and has a very geometric style with sharp lines and high contrast.
So, in what way does this image compare to spring sluicing visually?
Well, Manhattan Bridge Looking Up and spring sluicing both use perspective to emphasize the relationship between humans and their environment. In spring sluicing, the perspective is ground level, with the viewer being surrounded by the action and flow of the photograph. In Manhattan Bridge, looking up, the low angle makes the viewer realize that we are looking at an immense structure. In terms of composition, spring sluicing guides the viewer's eye through a dynamic, chaotic scene in which it is unclear what will happen next, while in Manhattan Bridge, looking up, a monumental architectural abstraction of steel and sky is created that has a calming effect. Both of these images use vertical and horizontal lines to convey both power and motion, one natural and one mechanical, while the other is industrial and architectural.
How about thematically? How do these two photographs speak to similar ideas?
Both images show significant themes of modernity and progress. In spring sluicing, the concept of human intervention in nature is highlighted as we see rushing water being controlled by technology. Manhattan Bridge, looking up, celebrates the feats of urban engineering as an embodiment of modern progress. Both images reflect Abbott's fascination with modern transformations of space. Another clear theme is movement and the emotions it evokes. Spring sluicing shows very fluid movement of water, alluding to life and motion. On the other hand, Manhattan Bridge, looking up, consists of very solid geometric shapes, stable and enduring. The juxtaposition of this movement shows how Abbott uses photography to capture fleeting and monumental moments in life. The new city speaks to a new way of life, new form of labor, and increasing emphasis on speed and technology. Somehow this might seem contrary, as the photos that we consider more industrialized were taken over 30 years earlier.
That's all really interesting. It's intriguing to see the juxtaposition of a rural environment and extreme industrialism, all within the same time frame.
Super intriguing for sure. Dom, did the images that you focused on also highlight this contrast between urban and rural?
Well, the image that I selected from the museum collection is Man on Horse-Drawn Sledge. The picture is built around a single, clear anchor, a dark horse planted in the center of a bright field of snow.
So you would say that the horse is the first thing that catches our attention?
Exactly. The contrast is the hook, and your eye lands on the horse first. From there, the image teaches you how to read it. Your gaze follows the leather traces down to the wooden sledge.
And that diagonal line pulls you through the frame, even though nothing's actually moving?
Yeah, the diagonal of the harness gives you a sense of pull and direction even though the animal is standing still, animating still objects. This phrase alludes to how still images are capable of communicating movement. What keeps the scene from feeling empty is the structure at its edges, a low horizon line rising behind the team. Those vertical trunks frame the picture and push upward, while everything else, the snow layers, the stacked logs, the rails of the sledge, press horizontally across the frame. Light does work here too. Shadows and dark indentations crease the snow, so it's not a blank sheet. There's texture and depth, and you can almost hear the crunch under the hoof.
So those trees are quietly holding the picture together?
Yes, those vertical trunks frame the picture and push upward, while everything else, the snow layers, the logs, and the rails of the sledge, press across the frame. That push and pull between the vertical and horizontal locks your attention in the foreground, where the work of the man and horse team exists.
And once we move past the horse and the sled, what should we be seeing next?
Repetition organizes the middle distance. Looking at the ends of the cut logs stacked behind the horse, you see round forms repeating like beats in a bar. They balance the living curve of the animal with geometric order.
So do all these details add up to a larger feeling about the scene?
I think, taken together, the details of this photograph serve as a symbol of stability and endurance. The horse embodies strength, and the heavy sledge and the piles of wood testify to human and animal labor and survival in this winter landscape. The human figure in the frame appears small relative to the land and the trees, but still resilient. The whole composition stages a relationship among humans, animals, and the environment, where each one counts and each one answers to the season. It captures a moment of motion that feels held in place. The horse and harness suggest a forthcoming pull, while the stillness says, not yet.
Wow. Are there any other Abbott photos we could look at with similar dynamics?
Yes, for sure. I want to discuss this alongside another New York photo by Abbott, Under the L at the Battery, from the 1930s, because it employs the same visual grammar with different materials. In Maine, leather and timber carry force. In the city, steel girders and shadow stripes do the guiding. In both, strong lines and repeating shapes create the order, indicating how bodies move through a system.
So, if you had to name the single most significant similarity between the horse picture and Under the L, what would it be?
I'd say the harness. In Maine, it's literal, leather pulling a load. In New York, it's more metaphorical. The lattice of beams overhead and the striped shadows on the street act like a harness for the city, channeling motion along fixed paths.
What role does the light play in that echo?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the light and shadow carve texture so we feel the ground. Under the L, light gets patterned by girders and falls in bands, almost a stencil across cobbles, cars, and shoes. In both images, light isn't just illumination. It's a tool for directing the eye and suggesting movement.
In both these photos, the figures feel small. Is that just scale, or is Abbott making a statement about agency?
I think you could probably make an argument for both. Scale first. The horse and man sit low under a broad winter sky. Commuters shrink beneath the train line. But it's also about agency. Whether you're working with a team in a logging yard or walking to work in lower Manhattan, you're moving inside a system that's larger than you. Efficient, yes, but it asks something of you.
Does the rural and urban difference change how we read order?
The materials change the mood. Leather and wood feel intimate. Steel feels impersonal, but the logic's the same. With the man on horse-drawn sledge documenting nature, those organic materials give a sense of intimacy, while the industrially made steel feels cold and unwelcoming. Order comes from repeated forms and strong lines that guide motion. The sledge sheen makes that order feel visible and close. The L makes it infrastructural and overhead.
So, based on this analysis, what would be your most significant takeaway that ties these two images together?
I think it comes down to that it's two places but one language. With diagonal poles, vertical fences, and repeated shapes, each picture shows how work is accomplished by fitting people and animals into patterns set by the landscape or the city.
Thanks, Tom. Next, we'll discuss an intriguing indoor photograph by Berenice Abbott titled Mealtime and what makes this image visually impactful.
Berenice Abbott's Mealtime captures a crowded dining hall filled with men sitting close together at long wooden tables. The black and white format enhances the contrast and structure of the scene. The men become part of a collective pattern, almost blending into the environment instead of standing out as individuals. The tight framing and the packed room create an immediate sense of closeness and order. The composition feels controlled and intentional, turning an everyday meal into a visual study of how people function within a larger group. What makes this image so powerful is how Abbott transforms a simple moment of eating into a reflection on unity and discipline.
So, building on that sense of unity, how does Abbott use line, repetition, and composition to reinforce order in this photograph?
The feeling of unity becomes even clearer when looking at Abbott's use of lines and repeated shapes. The tables and benches stretch across the room in straight horizontal lines, while the beams and hanging kettles above add vertical and angled lines that mirror the structure below. The men contribute to this rhythm as well, forming repeated shapes with their shoulders and heads. A central post divides the scene into two balanced halves, strengthening the overall symmetry. Abbott includes a standing man on the left side, which adds interest without breaking the pattern. All these elements work together to depict a group arranged within a highly structured environment, reinforcing the disciplined atmosphere that is apparent at first glance.
So, since the composition is so structured, how do light and space contribute even further to the meaning of mealtime?
Light and space deepen the themes already present in the composition. Sunlight entering through the windows illuminates some men while placing others in shadow, creating a layered effect that adds depth to the room. Reflections on metal objects add small highlights that stand out in darker tones. The space itself is tightly filled, with almost no empty areas. This crowded framing creates a sense of compression, emphasizing the close connection between the men. Despite the density, Abbott maintains balance by placing the standing figure and serving station on one side, countering the long row of seated men on the other. Light and space together create a room that feels both orderly and spacious, reinforcing the ideas of a structured communal environment.
So, now that we know about the composition, what can you tell us about the subjects? Do we know who these men were, and what were their occupations?
Yes, these men were lumbermen and woodworkers in Maine in the 1960s, coming in to eat a meal after a long work period.
Now that we understand how mealtime functions and the identity of the men, how does it compare to Abbott's Blossom restaurant, taken in Manhattan in 1935, 30 years earlier?
So, comparing the two photographs reveals how Abbott uses compositional structure to portray two very different environments. In Mealtime, repetition and tight composition create a sense of unity among the men. In Blossom Restaurant, Abbott captures the bustling streets of Manhattan, where overlapping signs, storefronts, and architectural features contribute to a visually busy scene. The solitary figure in the street appears small and overshadowed by the surrounding environment, which is the opposite of the cohesive group in mealtime. The lighting in Blossom Restaurant emphasizes the brightness of commercial signs and enhances the sense of urban energy. Together, these two images reflect Abbott's interest in how environments shape human experience, either by bringing people together or overwhelming them.
Looking more closely at Blossom Restaurant on its own, what makes this photograph significant in understanding Abbott's broader artistic vision?
When viewed on its own, Blossom Restaurant demonstrates Abbott's fascination with the modern city and its visual complexity. The photograph is filled with layered text, bold signage, reflective surfaces, and strong architectural lines, all competing for attention. This creates a sense of energy and visual overload that captures the essence of Manhattan life in the 1930s. The lone figure in the frame highlights how individuals can feel small in such an overwhelming environment. Unlike the controlled and unified setting of mealtime, Blossom Restaurant reflects the fast-paced, crowded nature of urban spaces. This comparison highlights Abbott's ability to utilize visual structure to comment on diverse social experiences. Whether she is photographing a dining hall like Mealtime or a city street like Blossom Restaurant, Abbott reveals how everyday spaces can communicate ideas about order, identity, and human behavior.
Thanks, Luca. I think overall, comparing these Maine images to Abbott's New York photographs show how consistent her visual language is. While Under the L at the Battery and Blossom Restaurant are built from steel, shadows, and crowded signage rather than logs, snow, and dining benches, the same artistic tools are at work. Strong diagonals convey a sense of motion, verticals that fence in space, and repeating shapes that guide the eye throughout the composition. Whether she captures scenes in a logging yard or under an elevated train line, Abbott consistently explores how structures shape movement and how individuals end up working within systems that often feel larger than themselves. That thread of continuity across different times and places is what makes her realism feel so focused and deliberate.
Taken together, these photographs invite us to think about the cost and comfort of order in everyday life. Abbott demonstrates the systems can support people, providing them with jobs, shelter, and community. But they can also oppress them, reducing individuals to mere parts of a larger pattern. By framing logs on a river, a horse and a sledge in the snow, and a man at long table, with the same kind of visual discipline she brings to the Manhattan streets, she makes ordinary spaces feel worth studying.
So now we have to consider how can we connect all these images. Well, Spring Sluicing, Man on Horse-Drawn Sledge, and Mealtime all show how Abbott observes the relationship between work, nature, and daily routines. In Spring Sluicing, the crowded river filled with logs initially appears chaotic, but the arrangement of wood, water, and snow turns into a system for moving water through a tough landscape. In Man on Horse-Drawn Sledge and Mealtime, we see the same thing on land and indoors. People and animals arranged in patterns that help them survive winter, do their jobs, and share space with each other. Even when the scenes are busy, Abbott's thoughtful use of lines, repetition, and contrast makes everything feel organized rather than random.
We hope that after listening, you start to notice these patterns in your own surroundings and see how lines, rhythms, and routines shape the way you move through the world too. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Crop and Click. Goodbye. Goodbye.